afternoon, everybody, and welcome again to one of our lunchtime series of webinars from the Ireland chapter of the PMI. Today, the subject is a nearly universal principle of projects, or as Nader will introduce you to it later, NUPP. So we have Nader with us today, and some of you who had joined us a number of weeks ago remember our webinar with Frank Turley, and Frank talked to us about P3 Express. Nader works alongside Frank, so we have a different take on the topic today. So Nader, who you can see with me here, welcome Nader, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Nader has been working in projects for 22 years, and he has worked across a gamut of projects, starting in construction projects as a planner, which is quite a complex piece of work. Anyone who's worked in construction will tell you. And then he's moved to process plant projects. In parallel, he's also worked in IT projects as well as startups. So from that background, he's gradually moved from planning into the wider project management domain. And he is working now, he's an author, and also he works alongside Frank in their consultancy firm as a trainer. And he works in the area of helping project managers and companies to improve their project program and portfolio management systems. So at the moment, he's spending quite a lot of his time contributing to standards development. So he is working on the PMBOK guide, as well as P3 Express and NUPP, which is what he's here to talk to us about today. So we have an interesting topic today, and we don't have too many slides for you again, so a nice interactive opportunity as well, just to try and keep the pace and the energy up. Before I hand over to Nader, just to let you all know as well, we are, as you guys know, we're using Zoom at the moment. I'll try a little poll today on Zoom as well, so we won't use the Menti poll today. Please do pop your questions into the Q&A on Zoom. You should be able to ask your question anonymously. You should also be able to look at other people's questions and upvote them. So if there's a question that you also wanted to ask and somebody else asked it, just click the like button and that will push it up the poll. And we hope to have about 10 minutes at the end to take your questions today as well. We will also try a little poll on Zoom again, just to see what that looks like. Standard questions, just asking you where you're joining us from today. And one other question today, which is, what do you think the most important component of projects is in terms of time, cost, quality, etc. So Nader, thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. And, well, let me see.
Yep, so we can hear you way there. So you can share your screen if you'd like to now as well. And
I don't have anything to share.
Perfect. I think people always enjoy a good conversation as well.
To keep it simple. Yeah, it's what I wanted to talk to you, everyone, was about NUPP, the nearly universal principles of projects, which is something that was developed about a year ago, and I think it can help us solve some of the problems we commonly have in projects. And it's also the same type of approach we've taken in the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide. As you probably know, the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide is based on principles instead of processes, the same as what we have in NUPP. It all started really about, I think, 2 years ago. I was reading a book. It was a number of letters and essays from Richard Feynman. You may know him, the famous physicist. He's really great. He's really, really great. Genius. And when I was reading, there was one part in one of his writings that he mentioned a problem that exists in the science community. And he said that what happens in those communities is cargo cult science. And then there was also a brief explanation of what cargo cult is. And then I went and read more about it, and I suddenly felt, well, that's exactly the problem we have in project management. Now, a few of you may know about the cargo cult. Let me share my screen and show a few things with you. I suppose you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see,
so,
I can see it perfectly, yeah.
Okay, great. So you can go on Wikipedia and read about the cargo cult. The whole story is that during the war, there was this these islands with people who were not part of the modern civilization. They didn't know much about what's going on in the other sides of the world. And suddenly the US Army builds a camp in builds a base in their island. And let me see if there are images here. No? Okay. Find images somewhere else. So they built the base, and every once in a while they had cargoes coming there, and that was something that the natives really loved, the fancy things. But after a while, the war was over, and the military left there. But they still wanted the cargo. They started thinking, what can we do? And the images you see here is their response to that. Take a look at this. They built airports, they built mock-ups of planes, and that's a tower at the end. This is the runway. And during the night, they light up the runway. They pretend that it's an airport, and they think that when they do it, then planes will come and bring them the cargo. Now, when you think about it, that's exactly what happens in many of our projects. People see that, well, that's this fancy company and they have really successful projects. How do they do that? Well, they use a lot of sticky notes. So let's use the sticky notes instead of something else. Let's have whiteboards, daily meetings. Let's have business cases, schedules, and project charters, and so on. But sometimes all you get out of that is like the cargoes that these people are getting out of these activities. That's really, really sad. There are even videos on YouTube. If you like, you can go on and check it, of course, after the session. Okay, so that was the idea of the cargo cult, and I really felt that we have this problem. And I started thinking, how can we solve that problem? What is it that we are missing when we imitate successful projects, or when we read about the way we have to run the projects based on the PMBOK guide, Prince2, Scrum, XP, or something else, and we do certain things and we don't get the result? What is the problem? And my answer was NUPP. What I thought can help is to start with a number of principles and always have them in mind when we are doing something. These are the things that give meaning to everything we do. They are the things that make Prince2 useful. Those are the things that make the PMBOK guide useful, PM Squared, DSTM, XP, Scrum. This is not something that doesn't exist. It's not completely new. It has always been there. What's happened in NUPP is that they are made clear and they are structured and provided in a simple way. We have just 6 principles, and all of a sudden I have a page here. Let me send it somewhere else. Yeah, that was the survey or something. Okay, I'm back.
Sorry, Nader, that was me launching the poll. Thanks.
No problem, no problem. It happens all the time. So as I was saying, it's a number of principles. They are really simple, I think. 6 principles. And if we consider them when we are working in our projects, I believe that our chances of success will be a lot higher. I worked on NUPP for a little more than a year, and it's been out for about a year. It's open source, it's licensed under Creative Commons like P3 Express. Both of them are free and open source. And it's been translated to 13 languages by volunteers, which is really great, really, really great. And the next thing that happened after NUPP was that I was invited to join the team for the PMBOK guide for the 7th edition. And we worked together to also turn the PMBOK guide from something that used to be process-based into something that is principle-based, because the idea is that The main problems are where we can address them with principles, not with processes. Processes are too detailed, they are too concrete, we need to be in different layers. We have to start somewhere else. It doesn't mean that we don't need processes, but it does mean that processes are not where we start. We start with principles. So, just one more thing to mention, and then I give you a really quick overview of the principles. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that NUPP is compatible with all the major established systems, with Prince2, the PMBOK guide, P3 Express, PM Square, DSDM, XP, Scrum. That's the things that I know. So let's start with the first principle. Let me open the page for NUPP. Okay, the first principle is to prefer results and the truth to affiliations. This one is really strange and needs a little bit of explanation. This is about the type of problems that we sometimes have. You know, how can I say that be politically correct? We usually believe that we have certain arguments and reasons for the beliefs that we have. But the reality is that sometimes we don't. We believe in something for some reason, for some strange reason, and then we try to construct reasons and arguments to support that. And where do they come from? Many of them come from our affiliations. Based on evolution, we have this need to be part of a group because human beings cannot survive on their own. We need to be part of a group. That's really part of our nature. But in today's civilized community, we don't need it the way we needed it before, especially the way some people do it. Sometimes the whole identity of someone is based on their affiliations, based on the fact that, for example, they consider themselves a Scrum practitioner or a Prince2 practitioner or something else. And that's wrong, because if, for example, you consider yourself, your identity as someone who's an XP practitioner, let's say, then you're closing yourself to other ideas. What you have to do instead of that is to consider yourself a project practitioner and be open to every idea that is out there. Because all of them may be useful to you. You have to be open and learn all of them and see when you can use each of them. The common things that we have these days, the war between Agile and what they call waterfall, that's just nonsense, really. It's sometimes the illusion of the external enemy and the things that some people use in order to get benefits out of it, and the majority of people are losing a lot of opportunities because of that. Right now we see that the Agile community has created some really interesting ideas, but they are not open to the ideas that were generated in the established project management community. And gradually, as they are expanding the use of Agile and using it in more larger projects, they run into some problems and they are creating methods and responses that practically existed before. They are reinventing the wheel. That's a pity. That shouldn't happen. We should be open to all of that. So that's the first principle. It's a little bit philosophical maybe, but that can be helpful. The other principles are more concrete, if you will, less philosophical. Let's go to the second one. Let me read it. So, the second one is to preserve and optimize energy and resources, which sounds like something that a project manager always does, right? But it goes a little bit further. The first thing that we can imagine is, for example, the 80-20 rule. that's a good example of what we can do. And that's one of the things that was used in building P3 Express. For those of you who were here before with Frank Terley, who told you about P3 Express, that's all about the 80-20 rule, trying to achieve 80% of the benefits, potential benefits, with 20% of efforts. But it goes above that. There's this theory that we have, it's a real scientific theory, okay? It's not pseudoscience like most of them. The theory is that we have one pool of energy, mental energy, that we use for making decisions, different types of decision. And it's also used for something we commonly call willpower, because willpower is also some type of decision making. You want to do something and you decide not to do that. That's a decision somehow. Now, there are a few things here. The first one is that this pool is shared for every type of decision we want to make. The other one is that it's limited. So what happens is that if you use that pool of energy for useless decisions or less important decisions, you will have less energy for important decisions in your project. Now, for example, you can think of it as a reason for having proper managed by exception in your project. When you delegate more to other people you have in the project, let them make the decisions, and you will stay focused on the high level things. In Princeton, for example, we have this rule that you shouldn't merge the roles of executive and the project manager. And one of the main reasons is that the project manager is the person who's involved in the day-to-day activities, but the executive is a person who must be thinking about really, really high-level aspects of the project. When you use your energy for the day-to-day activities, you don't have a lot of it for the high-level decisions. But there's more to it. For example, this source of energy is limited. What happens when you use it and it goes down? It's not gone forever. It fills up again. How does it fill up? That's with proper rest and proper eating, and probably not 100% sure, but also exercise. So what does it mean? It means that we should take care of ourselves. We should eat well, we should exercise, we should sleep well if we want to be good project practitioners. That's a good principle to have, right? The third principle. The third principle, oh, it's one of my favorites, always be proactive. In the past, I used to say that if you want to summarize the whole PMBOK guide in one sentence, it's that. Always be proactive. But that may be only me, I don't know. You know, I've had this experience a few times. You want to go somewhere with a few people, you're really late, you're the driver. I don't like driving, but it happens. So I sit down and I start setting my GPS navigation. And there's usually someone telling me, oh, come on, Nader, go, we're late, don't waste your time on that. But that's not really time wasted. I'm doing that because we are late. And that's the same thing we have in our projects. The whole idea of planning, that's being proactive. Risk management, that's the best example of being proactive. Defining roles and responsibilities up front, that's one way of being proactive. It's if it is compatible with your system. Or for example, you see that there are many different ways you may be fooled when you want to make a decision because of, for example, cognitive biases that we all have. All of us have them. So you start learning about critical thinking. There are many great books about critical thinking. This is also a proactive approach. Before something happens, you think about it. You don't wait for it to happen and force you to do something. You know? We don't like to be blamed, and when you don't make a decision, you think that because you are not the person who made the decision, no one can blame you. But sometimes the fact that you didn't make a decision was a decision. And what came out of it was because of you not making that decision, which is a decision by itself. So you're responsible anyway. But we have this tendency not to do that because we don't want to be blamed. This is one of the reasons we are not proactive sometimes. And there are also some evolutionary reasons for that, which is a little bit complicated maybe. Yeah, the idea is that, again, we have this tendency to procrastinate and be reactive sometimes because it's a subconscious trend to save our resources for emergencies, because we used to have a lot of emergencies. Think of lions and everything else in the past, long past. But we don't have them, and sometimes in our projects, the lions are in our projects, so it's best to be proactive all the time. That was the third principle going on. How's timing? Well, I'm good. The fourth principle. Remember that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Again, I can give you an example of the PMBOK guide. Think of the knowledge areas. By the way, we don't have knowledge areas anymore, but think of the past. But that's still the current version. So the knowledge areas. One common problem is that many project practitioners have really great systems in only one or a few knowledge areas. They spend a lot of time in time management, for example, but they don't care about the other knowledge areas. That doesn't work well. The weakest link there is one of the other knowledge areas, and it doesn't matter how great you are in scheduling, for example, you won't get a lot from it. The best way is to go and find the weakest link and fix that part. One of the consequences of this is to have a holistic view to the project, to consider everything. The idea of change management, that's about having a holistic view. That's about thinking about this concept of the chain. The other common problem that we have nowadays is about the systems that we use for running our projects, the methodologies that we have. For many different reasons, there's this trend. There has been this trend in the past few years. People give it different names, where they do cherry picking. They feel that that thing that people have in a Scrum is interesting. I want that. They pick that part. Oh, that thing that they have in the PMBOK guide is also interesting. I will pick that as well. Oh, Prince2 has something very, very special. I will bring that as well. This is not okay. This is not okay because any system must have consistency. The elements inside the system are interacting with each other, and they won't work properly unless they are compatible and consistent. That's the first thing we have, the first requirement that we have for any system. It's okay to bring things, to be inspired by different systems and bring elements from them, but they must become compatible with each other. But people don't do that, because they don't have a holistic view in the project. This is the other principle that we have here. That was the fourth principle. The fifth principle. We have just two more, so we will have a lot of time to go through the questions. Okay. The fifth principle, don't do anything without a clear purpose. So when I was a project scheduler, when I first started working in projects, I had this problem all the time. The project managers used to come to me and ask for different fancy things in the schedule. And I used to ask them, okay, but why do you want that? And the answer was, because that's the right thing to do, or because that's what the PMBOK guide says, so, or because Princeton says so. None of these is a good reason. We need to have a purpose for doing that. And when I say purpose, you can think of it like this. Imagine that in that point in time, the world splits and suddenly we have two parallel worlds. Everything is the same except for that one decision. Now those two worlds go on, and after a while, the while depends on your situation, you should be able to explain what the difference would be, the desirable difference that you will get because of adding that one element that you're thinking about. How different would it be? Why is it desirable? And finally, to explain if that good thing that you will get is justifiable based on the amount of effort that you spend on that. Saying something like, because the PMBOK guide says so, that's never a good reason. The PMBOK guide itself has reasons for suggesting those things, and those reasons are the things that you should use. And that's the same for everything. There's one example that I really love. It's about a long time ago, there was this manufacturer of elevators. I don't know if this story is real, but it's a really good story. So imagine that it's real. So they had this problem that people were complaining that the elevators are too slow. That's understandable. And then the manufacturer used to have multiple projects to improve the speed of elevators. And people were still complaining. So one day they wanted to initiate a new project for the same goal of increasing the speed. And one of the people who was responsible for that new project went to the executives and asked, why do you want to increase the speed? And the answer was, because people are complaining that the elevators are too slow. He asked, okay, why are they complaining that the elevators are too slow? Because it's not fast? Because they get bored, probably. Okay, they get bored. So what you want to solve is not that the elevators are too slow, but it's that people get bored inside the elevators, right? What they did was that instead of increasing speed, they put a mirror behind the elevator. And that solved the problem. And people even thought that the elevators are faster. They thought that it's gotten faster. It's crazy. Probably because they go in the elevator, they have something to do, they play with their hair or clothing or something. And later on, they also added music. But this is exactly what we need to do. The purpose. What is the purpose of what we want to do? These days, I don't do consultancy services anymore. I'm just focused on creating e-learning courses and working on the standards. But before, I used to do that a lot. And the first thing that I used to hear when I was joining a company to help them was that they used to say, we have a problem. Okay, I'm listening. What's your problem? Our problem is that we don't have a good project management system, or we don't have a PMO or something like that. But this is not a problem. This is your idea of a solution to a problem that you have. What is the real problem? And for example, in many cases, when they feel that they have a problem in the project management system, the real problem is that they are doing too many projects at the same time. And it means that they need to have a better portfolio management system to fix that problem. But anyway, think about the purpose of things. The other example, let me check time. We have enough time. Okay. The other example. again, as a scheduler, I realized that people, the stakeholders, didn't use my reports so much. It didn't work the way I wanted to. It didn't have an impact on the project. And then I started thinking about it. I had a lot of conversations with everyone. The first thing I did was that I reduced the size from 30 or 40 pages into 1 page. I still had to have the big report to say that we are working, but still, I also had the small report. That helped a lot. But then I realized something else. We used to go to the meetings and talk about the progress of the project. The common way of talking about progress was to say that so far, our actual progress is, for example, 32%, but it was supposed to be 45%. The planned progress was 45% overall, and in the previous months, our actual progress like this, and our planned progress was that. And I started thinking, what happens when we tell a manager all these numbers? And I thought, okay, I think what they are thinking right now is, can we finish the project on time? Or how much delay are we going to have at the end of the project? Are we going to be on budget? These are the main questions they have. So instead of giving them all those numbers and let them do it consciously or subconsciously, let us calculate those values. I started learning about earned schedule analysis, which is a really great thing for time analysis, and a lot of techniques, and changed my 1-page report into half a page. And it was mainly about the forecasts. What's our forecast for completing the project based on time and budget? And it really, really worked. It worked a lot better than before. And the key here was to focus on the purpose. What's the real purpose of the report? What's the real purpose of the information that we are communicating? So that was the 5th principle. Let's go to the last principle. The last one is to use repeatable elements. The common thing that we see in many projects, well, yeah, we have them in many projects, or at least in construction projects. It's something that I really liked. Whenever the contractor wanted to do concrete work, they used to prepare the form work and so on. And then a different organization used to come and check everything before they are allowed to pour the concrete. And those people who used to come, they had a checklist. And when you think about it, that really makes sense. Instead of going there and start looking, okay, the formwork looks to be okay, it's really stiff, and the other things, yeah, they are okay. I can't think of anything that is wrong here, so it's fine, go on. Instead of that, because you may forget something, you will have a checklist. That makes everything easier. You prepare a first checklist, and then if you go on and you see that, oh, you missed something, everything was fine based on the checklist, but still something went wrong, then you can fix the checklist, and it will be used from that moment on. Now, what we can do is to expand it to other things as well. Create different types of checklists for different elements, and make the checklists as general as possible, and then bring them from the project level into the organization level, which is a great thing to do, because then it will be available to all projects and even to the communities. For example, here in PMI Ireland, you can have a forum or something to talk about your checklists. For example, checklists related to your project plan. How do you want to make sure that your project plan is effective and well-formed? You can have a checklist. Now, this principle is not only about having checklists, it's about having elements you can repeat over and over again throughout your project, and also in your organization level, in multiple projects, and in a community level, for example, PMR Ireland, for multiple organizations. There are other things as well. A common thing is in our methodology. In many methodologies, we have elements that are repeated all the time. That makes everything simpler. That's a lot easier to use them. If you think of a Scrum, it's a cycle and it repeats all the time. That's one of the main reasons that it's easy for everyone to understand and use. Or XP, it has this really amazing daily routine that repeats over and over again every day. That's great. That's easy to understand and easy to improve. That's one of the important aspects. You keep using that. You don't have to think about the things you have to do every time. But still, when you're using that, you will run into problems, and that will be your reasons for improving that thing, which is great. Feature Express is also based on a lot of cycles, if you were there with Frank last time. So that was it about the principles. Let me share my screen for a second. Here we go. Okay. So you have, the website probably. This is the website for NUPP. And whenever you want, you can come here. These are the 6 principles. You can review them. There are lots of examples here. You can go through them. And if you prefer, you can use other languages, anything you want. And if it seems interesting to you, you can give it a try. You can give it a try. For example, write it down, put it on your desk for a while, and be conscious about it. When I published it, the reaction, the feedback was a little bit mixed. One type of feedback that I used to get from some people was that, well, these things are so obvious. Why do we need to talk about them? Is there anyone who doesn't do these things? Well, I really don't know who you work with, but I see these problems all the time, and I have these problems myself. That's why I'm conscious about them. One of the reasons that I have them structured like this is I want to keep reminding myself that I have to work like this. For example, I need to have a purpose and not waste my time on unimportant things. But you can give it a try. You can think about it. For example, you can pick a few principles if you want and try them for a week in your work. See if everything you do is compatible with the principles. And if not, how can you do it differently? And what would happen if you do it differently? That's an idea. Okay. So, yeah, I'm done.
So I'm just sharing the 6 of them there on the screen, Nader. Hopefully you can see that as well. And we do have a couple of questions also. So I think just for everyone on the chat, we've shared the link, and that'll be in the slides as well, so you'll be able to go through it. One of the things I wanted to say to you, Nader, was that number 3 really resonates with me, because it is something that I find myself repeating a lot to project managers. It's not going to happen if someone isn't chasing it. It's just very little happens on projects through inertia. And personally, as a project manager, that can really be exhausting. Like, just to acknowledge that for all of the people that are with us on the webinar as well, constantly having to be the person that is proactive is exhausting. And it can be a little bit disheartening when you find that other people constantly need nudges. I had a conversation just at the end of last week from a sponsor who did a great job. There was a steering, there was an issue that had to be dealt with, He, as a sponsor, he got involved, he took the lead, he made the decision. And in chatting with me afterwards, he said, oh, the project really should have been able to handle this themselves. So I had a great chat with him where I said, really appreciate that you got involved, really appreciated that you helped them make a decision. You're the sponsor. So that's why every now and then you need to come into the room and you need to help them make a decision, because that's why you're the sponsor. Ultimately, you're the business owner and you're going to be the person that benefits from this project. So there was this feeling that, and I see it all the time, I've put a project manager on it now, I've put a BA on it, I've put an IT team on it if there's software involved, what more do you want from me? And I think for me, that's the factor that catches people a lot. It's not over until it's delivered across the line effectively. So so we do have a couple of questions for you as well, Nader, that I'll guys, those are the 6 principles. I've actually popped them into the chat as well. So if you've got questions on any of those, but we do have a couple of questions coming in the Q&A, so we'll probably have a look at those later. So we did get a question earlier, just so you know, on the 6 principles. So just to have them in front. So I did actually paste them into the answer, and I popped them in so people could see them. So, so Nader, taking into account your previous experience in construction, this question has actually come up previously in webinars. So someone with construction experience in planning particularly, what are your thoughts on Agile outside the software development field? So did you have any experience of it? Do you have experience of it now?
Okay. That's one of the problems that we have nowadays. Some people are too excited about Agile and they think that they can use it in every type of project, which is absolutely wrong in my opinion. And we can only answer it when we define what Agile is. And many people don't want to do that. And one of the reasons is that if they define what Agile is, then maybe what they are doing is not Agile, and they really want to have a nice label for what they do. The best definition that we can have for Agile is to use an adaptive life cycle instead of a predictive life cycle. In a predictive life cycle, we think about everything up front. We create a plan that defines the best way of approaching the product that can satisfy the needs. And then we use it to go on and build whatever we are going to build. That's predictive. Sometimes that's the best approach, sometimes that is not. And that's when we need to have more feedback from the environment. The environment is unknown and there's no good way of understanding how it's going to react. So instead of having the upfront plan, instead of predicting everything, we will have a simple strategy instead of a complete plan. And then we will go on with a certain approach that can enable useful feedback. That's not easy. That's not easy at all. We will go on with that. We will generate feedback. We will use the feedback to realize what's the best next step. That's adaptive. That's Agile. Now, when it comes to construction projects, or any type of project, there are 2 questions we need to ask ourselves. One is, can we be adaptive? And the second one is, do we want to be? Do we want to be? That's easy. For example, in a construction project, do you need to have feedback? Do you need to have feedback to decide how many floors you want to have? Or if it's a bridge, do you need feedback to, I don't know even what to say. You can define everything up front. You can design and describe the whole product up front. You don't need that type of feedback. It's not like IT projects, many IT projects. In many IT projects, it doesn't matter how much you study the market, it just doesn't make sense. You just have to go on and see what people want. In that situation, adaptive is the best way. Going back to the first question that we need to ask is, can we be adaptive? And you can only be adaptive when you have iterative development and incremental delivery, because those are the requirements for generating feedback. And we cannot have any of those 2 things for construction projects. We cannot have iterative development because, for example, we cannot iterate in our design. We cannot design the foundation of a building, go on and after a few months design the rest of the building. the design of the foundation depends on the design of everything else that you have. So all designs have to be done together. That's the opposite of iterative development. So my answer is no, Agile is not usable in every type of project, especially in construction project. Unless you have a tiny subset of your construction project, which is a special and has the need and the possibility to be run with an adaptive system.
I feel like that's quite a definitive answer because it has come up quite a bit. So hopefully that's, but it's given one person's perspective on it, which is good to hear. We have a question from Brian. From your experience, Nader, what are the most flexible software tools for managing projects using the set of principles?
Well, NUPP is not for managing projects, really. NUPP is something you use when you are using something else to manage your project. So the answer for the tools and techniques and everything else depends on the methodology that you use. What NUPP does here is to make you conscious about some of the pitfalls you may have in your project management, helps you be better in any type of methodology that you have. Okay.
And are you building a framework around that? Because I know you're involved with the P3 Express as well, which was actually very well received when we had that webinar a couple of weeks ago. Particularly for, this would include myself, for groups of people that are working maybe in project management, where, like, I've come from a background where, like, I've been fortunate enough to work with a group of people that were all PMP certified, that had third level education in project management, had 20 years, 10 years, 15 years experience in project management, but not everyone has that. So P3 Express, I found, really gelled with a lot of people on the webinar, because it kind of brought it back to basics a bit and just said, you know, don't wreck your head with these tomes of knowledge. Just start out, and as Frank had called it, making it easier to learn and practice project management. So so it kind of makes it clearer. Maybe it's easier to map the principles back to something when it's not so complicated, particularly for people starting out.
Yes, they are really cousins, NUPP and P3 Express. P3 Express is older than NUPP, but NUPP is more general. It's not limited to P3 Express. It can be used with Prince2, Comm, and many other things.
Very good. So we had, I know Will has made a comment here as well. I think you can see the chat as well. So, and I guess maybe, is this what you're saying? Rather than taking proven processes and best practices from other organizations to be successful, use the principles to build a scaled structure that is bespoke to help the specific challenge you face. That actually kind of gels with me. That makes sense to me as well, that you don't overcomplicate things for yourself. You try and, I suppose, what was your number 5? Don't do anything without a clear purpose. So understand what it is that you're trying to do before you go off and tackle the problem.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I'm not against using best practices or experiences from other organizations, but what we are all really worried about is when people use them without understanding them, without making them compatible with the system they have, without tailoring them. And when everything is on the surface, you just don't get the results. That's exactly the cargo cause. Don't forget to watch that video on YouTube. That's really interesting about cargo.
That's the first, I've never heard of it before.
Oh, that's great.
I'll definitely be looking it up. Never heard of it.
You feel every second of that. It just makes sense. You see everything you've experienced in your projects come in front of you.
I'll share, hopefully people can see this on their screens. Maybe Nader, you can tell me if you can see. I just want to share the poll results, if you can see that.
Yes, yes.
So we do like to ask where people are joining us for, and this is particularly because webinars are obviously a new feature because of the restrictions on travel, etc. at the moment, and on gatherings. And what we're seeing with the webinars is that we are stretching the reach. So we about just over 30 people respond to the poll, and there's over 50 people on. So just a little bit more than half of the people on the webinar responded. So we still would have our highest audiences coming in from Dublin, but we're getting a nice spread across the rest of Ireland. And the polling is a little bit limited for me, but we do actually get people joining us from outside of Ireland as well, which is great because it means, you know, we can reach a wider audience, particularly for people like yourself that are speaking from, you know, other chapters, etc. It's good to get the mix out there. And in terms of organizations as well, it would typically actually be quite a lot of IT and financial. I'm surprised nothing in pharmaceutical, because we would typically have some people in that area as well. And maybe I find this interesting. So maybe gelling nicely, Nader, with your principle number 2, where you're talking about, you know, the careful use of resources. Planning is coming out as the top thing. So we asked basically, what's the most important thing in your opinion when you're running a project? Interestingly enough, the second one is keeping the customer, the end user, happy, which is not written in any principle really when you think about it. It's because it's always about delivering the scope that you're asked to within the budget and within the time, and obviously planning it very carefully. But it is, I would say, it's a fact of life that if you end up delivering something and your customer isn't happy with it, well then have you delivered effectively? It might really link back into your principle number 5, where you spoke about the elevator story. And when you were telling that story, I was smiling because we have 2 elevators where I live, and one of them has a mirror and one of them doesn't. And I was sitting there going, you know, I think he's right. And neither one of them has piped music. But yeah, I think actually it's a longer trip up on the one that doesn't have the mirror. So it's interesting, like what do people want? They didn't particularly want an unsafe elevator journey. They just wanted it to feel like it was over faster than it was. So it's good to see planning is coming out on top there. And those are the poll results, which we'll share.
But there's a really good option here, getting results. That's a good choice, but not many people are.
You know, when I've done this before, we had people who were maybe on the webinars a while ago. I put having fun in here once, and it got literally 0 responses. So it might go back to the frustration with principle number 3, which is always be proactive, where sometimes we're a little bit exhausted. So the next time I might add celebrate, because we had a webinar a couple of months ago with Peter Taylor where we talk about the value of having fun in projects. This is what we do for a living, and we're doing it at least 40 hours a week, if not longer, particularly if people are involved in interventions and, you know, overnight rollouts, etc. So it is important to remember what we did, to celebrate that we did it, so that we can move forward. So yeah, so getting results at 13%. You could argue it's linked with keeping the customer happy, I suppose. But I'll have to add in celebrate the project completion as well to see, because it's something I think we need to pat ourselves in the back.
More inclusive, isn't it? Because you know, when you're doing a project, it's not only for the customer. It also has to benefit you, and it's not only financial benefit. You want to grow, you want to be better than before, you want to be better in your future projects, you want to be happy, you want to be safe, you want to learn. And also the end user is important, because the end user is about the long term. Customer satisfaction, when we talk about it, normally it's the short term thing, but the long term customer satisfaction connects to the user satisfaction and a lot of things. But getting results, it's a vague choice that can include all of them. Yeah. If it was an exam, that would have been my choice.
Okay, so we've no more questions. I don't know if there's anything that you want to wrap up on. So I will stop sharing the poll results now and just pop back into. I've 1 or 2 short slides for the guys, and then, as you know, Nader, because you've seen them already. So like I said, guys, I popped in the links. So when you go in, you'll see a little bit about Nader himself, and you can connect with him on LinkedIn as well. And you can see a bit more on Plaza training, which is where Nader is consulting. You'll have the 6 principles here, and you can go into that website and have a look through. And there is, I think, a lot of artifact information as well as links to P3 on that website as well. So actually, before I go to the PDUs, we've 2 more webinars coming up. We've one on the 29th of June, and we have one on the 1st of July. And then we're going to take a short break, and we're already building up the schedule from September onwards. So you will actually start to see that coming in to the PMI webpage very shortly, and you'll be able to book whatever you want going forward. But in the meantime, particularly for people who are maybe trying to collect a couple of more PDUs for their recertification, there are plenty of other webinars that you can join in the meantime. Some of them are recordings, so the PMI ECC, this is the European collaboration that we spoke about previously. They are adding a lot of the webinars from the other chapters around Europe, and some of these actually will also be in different languages, so that's always a good thing. So it's great for people to join us, to practice your English if it's not your first language, but also to join here. You will find webinars in other languages, which is good as well. So and it gives you a wider scope of topics to join. The projectmanagement.com, so if you're a member of PMI, you are also given access to projectmanagement.com webinars, and they've got a lot of them coming out through, that's the August timeframe. And as I said, we've got 2 more coming up in if you go to our website, you'll see that we've got a couple from the Italian chapter of the PMI all around the area of disciplined Agile. So there's a lot of people that are quite interested in that at the moment. So it's good to know that that's there as well. I shall go backwards now, guys. So we'll report the PDU for you. I just want to say that I should have your PMI member number from when you registered. So as long as I have that, you'll definitely get your update. Also, just be mindful that not every certification qualifies for every type of PDU. This is not my area of expertise, so I will ask that in September we do a meeting around certification PDUs, so that if anyone is interested and has queries or concerns about how PDUs work, you can join that. We'll probably run that in meeting format, so you'll be able to interact, ask questions, etc. And we'll maybe go a little bit into more detail on that. But for now, there's 1 technical PDU for attending this webinar, and we will obviously auto-register you, as I said, if we have your PMI member number. We will also have a recording of this, as Nader knows as well, so we will share the recording and we will share slides after this in the next couple of days. Essentially, they'll go up onto the website. So Nader, thank you very much for speaking to everyone today. I know you're obviously involved in the reviews of the PMBOK guide, but it's very good, I think, for our members to listen and hear about different principles and different practices as well. So it's universal.
Yeah, actually, I thought there would be questions about the PMBOK guide, but didn't come up.
They're probably exhausted. We've had so many technical webinars in the last couple of weeks, which is why we need a break for summertime. So thank you very much for that, and we may well have you back again, maybe to talk to us about the PMBOK in the latter half of the year. So, okay, thank you, Nader.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great being with you, all of you.